Rivers do not drink their own water. Trees do not eat their own fruit. The sun does not shine on itself, and flowers do not spread their fragrance for themselves. Living for others is a rule of nature. We are all born to help each other. No matter how difficult it is, life is good when you are happy, but much better when others are happy because of you.
Many of you on the African continent have heard of Mr. George Soros, a billionaire in the United States, a citizen of the United States, a citizen of Hungary, who has tried and said he wants to create a better Africa, a better world. But is it a better Africa or a worse Africa for us? Why have we as Africans based our facts on handouts from people who call themselves philanthropic capitalists? Philanthropic capitalism is one of the worst and the dangerous access to finance, which kills Africa in the long run. Once you get this type of capitalism and finance, you are tied to the goals and aims of the people who are giving you this money. Is Africa going that route? Is our world changing towards a philanthropic receiver of money that has strings attached to? Most of the African countries, especially South Africa, where George Soros and Open Society Foundation have the wider network of operations, have indeed created us what we call philanthropic capitalism. But look at South Africa today. Instead of growing more crops, they have grown into agitation of new changes, democracy in housing, new changes in electoral reforms. They have stabilized their electoral reforms. They don't fight after elections, but they don't grow food. The food that is grown is for the few people in South Africa. Is it time now for us in the Africa to think of policies that will generate us, get us out of poverty, instead of tying us on poverty, thinking we are better off on philanthropic capitalism? It is a disease that is growing, that every African leader or leaders in Africa, they intend to go to these countries. Every African leader goes to France, to India, and the big countries, to Britain, to America now on 14th of December. Every African leader will wear the best suit to be seen in Washington, D.C., to be given what they want from America. But the people giving you what they want, they always have their strings attached to what they have given you. They are not giving you for free. But let's look at a comparison of the Chinese who have come and built roads, which we see physically, the roads. Yes, there are dates on the roads. Africa will have to pay for this infrastructure. But mark you, the same countries today telling us not to build roads, not to eat roads, are the same countries that have benefited from the methods of building canals all the way from Atlantic Ocean up to an Atlantic Ocean. Canals that were built in America, the canals that were built in France, from Calais up to Paris. These canals help in the transportation of goods and irrigation of arable land in France for them to grow enough food. Miriam, don't you see this? And all of you people watching me, will you not see that this is a double standard? The countries that are telling us that we should not take money from China to build our infrastructure are the same countries whose infrastructure is based on the same infrastructure, roads, canals, airports, railway. They don't want us to build those things, but they want us to build their own things. Yet they are back at their homes. They use them, and that has made them to easily transport manufactured goods out of Britain, manufactured goods out of France, manufactured goods out of America. It's time for us to stop philanthropic capitalism on the continent of Africa. How do we stop philanthropic capitalism on the continent of Africa? It is by Miriam, ourselves, and ourselves alone, to start talking about what we can do for Africa, instead of going around the world begging for people, and for people calling us into the White House to give us envelopes that do not reflect the reality on the ground in Africa. George Soros, therefore, is a man on the move, and be careful. He comes in so many ways. He comes in so many ways that does not tell us to grow food. I've not seen any project of George Soros that tells us to grow food. I've never seen any project of George Soros, of anybody in any country in Africa, that says there is a farm of George Soros for growing more tobacco, for growing more carrots, for growing more rice, for growing more flowers to export to Europe. I've only seen a project of demonstrations for making a better noise, so that demonstrations can come and uprisings are pumped to destroy what Africa has built. I submit and land the mic. Conflicts in Africa have retarded the development that we wanted after independence. Several African countries, as we speak, are under conflict, starting from Libya, Central African Republic, Somalia, Ethiopia, Democratic Republic of Congo, and Mozambique, to some extent, have been under the banner of conflicts and the bleeding children of Africa. The conflict in South Sudan came to a close, to an end, but the solutions are still very far to be achieved. We have not achieved a permanent solution for the people of South Sudan. We still have conflict lingering amongst the leadership in South Sudan. How long it will take for us to have a permanent solution for South Sudan is only upon us Africans to sit down and look at ourselves as to whether this conflict in South Sudan pays us in the Great Lakes region. The Congo conflict also has taken a new dimension, that for the first time, the East African Stabilizing Force decided to come into place and shape to deliver an East Africa stable out of negative elements of M23 and other rebel forces of ADF and others that are camped in Democratic Republic of Congo. Over 132 rebel groups are on the soil of Congo. How then do we solve this problem of Congo? Don't we boldly state and say, surely Congo needs rearrangement? Across the east of the Horn of Africa, we have another conflict that has been there since 1991. It is one of the oldest conflicts on the continent of Africa, in Somalia. A few days ago, terrorists in the heartland of Somalia killed several people, bombed buildings, destroyed property, and the conflict still goes on unchecked. If Africa can bring down the curtain of conflicts, Africa will rise and we shall see a better Africa. The conflict in Libya, therefore, like the conflicts that are there in other parts of Africa, presents a challenge to the African Union. That African Union itself has been able to recognize both the government in Benghazi and the government in Tripoli. How come that we have two governments in one nation? That the French have taken the Benghazi and the Turkish have taken Tripoli? Are these conflicts our own making or externally funded to benefit the external forces that yearn for the resources of Africa? If that is so, when will Africa stand up, reject the notion that conflicts must be the thing of the past, that conflicts must never deter our developmental programs, that we hardly get to go through every 5 years, that development can only come when there is a peaceful environment that can enable investors and businessmen to conduct their businesses without hindrance. It is therefore my submission that conflicts in Africa are self-made. We allow them to go on. There are some that are self-made. There are some that are externally funded by our enemies to make Africa a child that is sick, so that we can go and borrow from them. Let's watch out. 2023 should be used as a year of silencing guns on the African continent. We laud you, President, former President of Kenya, and the President of Kenya himself, Dr. William Samoei Ruto, for having appointed the former President Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta to take charge, to continue with the peace missions that have brought some fruits in Ethiopia, which we must not hibernate. The conflict must not be allowed to hibernate, but it must be resolved. We must follow up with stakes of getting money, resources to mobilize and demobilize the people, the troops that once held the guns. With those few words, ladies and gentlemen, I invite you to this video. Thank you. Viewers of this video and clip will understand that a global meltdown is affecting almost everybody in the universe. Under the sun, each country across continents, especially those in Europe near the Ukrainian-Russian war have been affected. How has Africa safeguarded itself? How will Africa safeguard itself, its citizens, from all these global meltdown that we expect to come, and which is already biting some of the countries? The food, fuel, and the cost of living is high. People cannot afford a meal, drought, floods. How do we get out of this? We need to start talking to our people. The message is to talk. Governments need to deliver messages, dialogue, sit down and talk to the people and tell the truth that this is not going to be an easy fix. It is going to be a long-term process to fix the economic meltdown that is going to affect the entire world. The fragility of our political systems, political democracies, the fragility through regime change sponsored by those who have been sponsoring regime change across Africa, the fragility through insecurity, the insecurity that we see across the continent of Africa, in some parts of Sahel region, Somalia, in Ethiopia at the moment. This will all come together and give us a run for our money. The economic meltdown comes with several of those factors that can be very destructive to the governance of our states on the African continent. How prepared are we as Africa and as the African continent? How prepared are the governments to solve some of the problems? I believe that there should be measures like start diversification of our farming, our techniques, our handling of reserving and reservation of some of the items that are much needed. We have just come out of COVID-19, which taught us quite a lot of lessons, that Africa did not have even one incubator, that Africa did not have even beds for ICU. Can't we learn from this? Why are we not prepared? Why are you not prepared? Why is it that we cry about floods? Why do we cut the trees? Why don't we tell the people the truth that trees are cut, the land, the soil will be left vulnerable for floods to come in, because there will be nothing. When it rains, no trees to absorb the water. We have a problem here. The people of Africa need a lot of education, and that education can only come if we are united, if we are focused, if we are resilient, if we can allow governments to explain their policies, remove corruption from every sector, whether tree planting, fuel subsidies, increment of food prices. Patriotism should be the answer today. In this current situation, Africa should start going to a patriotic school to know that there is something that is not going to end now, because the war in Ukraine might just melt away, but it will melt away when we have suffered. We must prepare ourselves. An economic meltdown is for real. It has affected banks. It has affected our currencies. It will affect our imports and exports. There are people talking about giving people money. But if you give people money, who will buy the goods? The money can be there, but the power purchase is zero. You can buy goods to trade, whether you're a small farmer, whether you're a small consumer, SME, everywhere in Africa. But who is going to purchase the goods? Who buys them? Who is going to fight? Because there is no money in the hands of the people. So time has come for us to devise a method Because for people that live in developed democracies, there is a social contract that once you don't have the money, you go and sign and you are given the money until you get a job. Have we prepared our people? Therefore, the answer is no. Let's begin preparing them, because the situation is going to be very, very bleak. We are at a disaster point. Cliffhanger, economic difficulties are here. Let's be tolerant to the governments in Africa, that some of them should start teaching the people on what is to come. And I have begun by teaching people and asking people of what might be coming. Thank you very much. This is Punchline Africa TV, broadcasting from the Political Command Center in London and back in Nairobi, myself and Miriam Ogutu in Nairobi. Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Viewers, a few years ago, Africa had one of the most prosperous countries on the continent. That country was called Libya. Libya under Gaddafi, after the overthrow of King Idris, became a prosperous country, one of the first-class countries on the continent of Africa. Libya played a vital role in the liberation of South Africa and the liberation of the remaining states that lacked support financially, militarily, to remove colonial powers from the continent of Africa. Libya became one of the few founding states on the continent of Africa to have free education up to the university, to have free water, free money after you come out of the university. Students were given $5,000 to start, less unemployment, which has killed most of the African states. But while these things were taking place and the development was taking place in Libya and on the African soil, several Western countries were hatching a plan to kill, to maim, to destroy the country of Libya. Under Resolution 1970 of the United Nations Security Council, they did manage to kill, to destroy, to land bombs on the country called Libya. A resolution that was taken by France to the United Nations Security Council became a cornerstone that destroyed the entire North African politics once for all. Colonel Muammar Gaddafi, the then leader of Libya, was very categorical that he was not a terrorist, but the people coming to take over Libya were terrorists. He warned of the circumstances, dire consequences. If he was taken out of power, Libya would come down to nothing, and insurgency, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, all types of terrorists will gather in the Maghreb and the northern part of Africa and destroy the economies, something which is happening today in the Sahel region, in Mali, in Burkina Faso, in Nigeria, and other states around, in Chad, other states around the Sahel region. It is sad, therefore, that a man comes to borrow money from you. You lend him the money. He goes to use that money to influence an election. He wins an election, but he comes back to plot to kill you who has given him the money. That is what happened with Troy, Libya. As we speak today, Libya is divided into two camps. The French have taken Benghazi in Libya. Yesterday, a court in France found Mr. Sarkozy guilty of having used money to influence elections in France. The court in Paris sentenced Mr. Sarkozy 1 year in prison. Today or tomorrow, what we know, he has been sentenced. But it is the same money that he took from Mama Gaddafi that made him to be sentenced. The legal department of African Union has not made an attempt to try to help Libya, to bring Karbi, the people who destroyed, killed, maimed the people of Libya, on trial. It is therefore very sad for us to sit here. There is no African leader, no African head of state who is talking about Gaddafi today and the plight of Libya. A very successive AU summits, we seem to come to show for photos, but we don't deliberate much to make resolutions bite on the question of Libya. Libya is bleeding. Its resources are being siphoned out by France and other Western countries that have actually, plus Russia, which has also come in on the side of General Khalifa Haftar, and they are together as members of the Permanent United Nations Security Council. They are siphoning the resources of Libya. They have decided to divide the country into two, in Tripoli, two governments working in different directions. How then, why then is African Union very silent? Why has African Union not spoken and stood up to ask the Security Council of the United Nations to tell one side of Libya, to tell France that what you are doing in Libya is wrong? Why? Any student of international relations would know that the AU itself is captured by the African Union Commission chairperson, Dr. Mohamed Faki of Chad, is captured. Therefore, he cannot condemn the actions of the same people